lot of the work at the studio has been bound up into a book called Collective Wisdom, which is out on November 1st with MIT Press. And we're really fortunate to have Ai Weiwei give us an endorsement, which I think speaks to this workshop about the idea of utopian possibility and also the urgency with which we need to learn how to and share how we co-create, even when it's difficult, even especially when it's across difference. The book is based on 166 interviews and 251 projects. And here's a little trailer for the field study to give you a sense of some of the themes in the book. One of the main things that came out of the field study and is inspired by a lot of the work that I did at the National Film Board of Canada, co-creating, is this idea of a manifesto or principles. And this is really at the core of some of the things that we're hoping you do in this prompt today, which is that in co-creation, we come into the room and build relationships first, and then the agenda, the vision, the story, the media come out of those relationships. And this is not to say that other forms of creation aren't legitimate or even important and have a really important place in the current cultural landscape, where there's an author who comes into a room with the vision and finds collaborators to realize that vision. So at its core, co-creation for us is more towards the spectrum of people coming in, listening to each other and building out whatever they do afterwards. And so that's kind of the interesting part of this exercise, is to map out those partnerships and think about how that co-creation is supported by the relationships. I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that I did at the National Film Board of Canada for as an example of co-creation and this partnership model. High-Rise was a 7-year-long project, and we worked with land use planners, architects, residents in high-rise buildings all around the world to explore the relationship between the city and the web and how we can become better citizens of both rather than just consumers of them. And it resulted in a multiplicity of projects. These are some of them. And each one was exploring new technologies, working with scholars embedded in academic processes, working very closely with participatory models with residents. And each one really was very different from the last in the way that the project manifested and the stories were told. This is another way in which we've mapped out some of the projects, and you'll see that they're not just one thing. A lot of them had many different iterations that I'll get into a little bit with the example that I share with you. Important to note, a lot of it was set in an academic process. So we went through research and ethics boards. We used participatory action research models, and especially peer research. A lot of partners, I'll get into those again when I get into the worksheet, but the project as a whole had these high-level partners as well. First project, and it was exploring the possibility of global high-rise where you could go into apartments. This window with a different city.
Kat, we can't hear you. Yeah. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
You're gonna have, yeah. So anytime you have music on, we can't hear you.
Okay, that's good to know. It must be the sound from the computer. Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this is just to give you an example of the workflow. Again, it's sort of a partnership model where some people are inside the NFB, many aren't. It was really remotely organized as well. Another project at the, I don't know if you can hear me, so I'll turn this off. But the short history of high rise was a project with the New York Times. And here we were playing with touch technologies on iPads. The most successful storytelling happening on iPads at the time were children's books. So we were inspired by them to tell the story of the high rise building across the New York Times archives images. Give you a taste of that.
Not so very long ago, though the city of New York was still young, from the land beside Central Park a new sort of building sprung, a montage of modern convenience.
And in this case, we were working across two institutions, legacy media institutions. Now it's more common, but back then, the idea of a legacy film institution working with a legacy newspaper organization was pretty unusual, and it was really complicated. Even just the interdepartmental logic and governance and workflow, it was a lot of work to manage this. So I'm just giving you an example of what that map looked like. The project I want to focus on for this exercise is called 1 Millionth Tower.
The concrete residential high-rise is the most commonly built form of the last century.
I think this space has huge potential.
We really need some place to build a community.
That's not a video, you're actually seeing the computer turning the camera in this 3D world.
We're just trying to make a photo come alive, to say like, the space is alive.
As we say that the whole world is connected now, our world around in the neighborhood will be connected.
In this model, it was really a remix thing where documentarians, as documentarians, we were working with residents in a building for a year before we started this project. The whole project was framed by architects, a tower renewal project that they were introducing to the city of Toronto. But then we decided, let's put them together. And then we added animators to the mix. And then we added web developers and user testers. And I've got a short video here to explain the collaborations.
Do many people walk along here?
No, it's all fence.
But we don't have any access to the park, and we see some holes in the fences.
Sometimes it's too ugly to look around, and you will not be happy to invite a friend or family to come.
The question is, what can we do with this space, right?
Yeah.
Any ideas?
Why don't we start drawing, now that we've got that context, where we think those paths might go.
So you were saying that you want us to envision the whole big picture.
Whatever you think should be happening.
Right.
Just creating spaces that are like intimate and flexible.
The marketplace could connect both buildings.
The problem is, this is not very good accessible.
There should be a daycare, that's it.
There should be a daycare.
We're just trying to make a photo come alive, to say like, the space is alive, but it still feels really empty, and to slowly build the characters to come on top of it, to make it breathing and moving. none of these images are final. They're just placeholders, just to give you a feeling of where it's going. So we're hoping to transform the space from like daytime to nighttime in the animation. And then moving on to the garden, we want this piece section to feel really meditative.
It's beautiful, look at it. Oh my gosh. I'm like in another world right now, just by looking at it.
We don't have Jamal breakdancing yet, but we're hoping to use him.
We practice hip hop, R&B, soca, and reggae.
I had been following Mozilla's Popcorn project, and I realized that our short film, 1 Millionth Tower, could benefit from integrating more into the web. And so I asked the web developer to begin exploring HTML5. He proposed that our film turn into a virtual space online that the user actually travels through instead of creating a linear film.
And I thought, well, this looks so 3D, then why not actually make the experience 3D?
So the animators moved right into Helio Studio and started working together to create that space. It's a tribute to the power of imagination. It comes from nothing and it turns into something, and I think we've all been a part of that.
People will see this, they'll see how self-evident it is, and we've already got the ball rolling.
We forget how valuable it is to actually create a neighborhood.
I personally feel like we are pioneers.
Like they say, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. So hopefully one day we'll get somewhere and say, oh, we did it, you know?
We, because of the technology that we used, Wired got interested in the story, and we premiered on the front page of Wired for 48 hours. We had visitors from 142 countries. One of them wrote on Twitter, came for the tech, but stayed for the story. And we were really inspired by that ability to equate the city with these open source technologies. We also launched at the Mozilla Festival in UK, which was really fun. We partnered with the transit system in Toronto and translated the film into 6-foot huge posters that were exhibited in the subway system for 2 months. And the idea here was just to create a different kind of message about re-envisioning these spaces over 1,000 plus modernist high-rises built in the 60s and 70s in the suburban ring around Toronto that were really considered neglected and disintegrated from the city, but in fact are these incredible sources of cultural, political strength and power, and also infrastructurally really decent places to live if they're well taken care of. We brought the makers of the project downtown, a place where they very rarely went, to CBC Radio to meet with the host, Matt Galloway. Matt Galloway got really inspired by the project, ended up coming up to the towers and doing a 3-hour remote broadcast that was very widely listened to in Toronto and animated a lot of the conversations around tower renewal in the city.